Alright guys, welcome back to another video. As I said last time, today we're going to be going over the anatomical directions. Going to be really useful here in our content review of other systems, especially the bones. I already did those, completed that, so I know how relevant it is in describing where bones are, where muscles are, where organs are. So definitely try to remember these if you have not already. So the first pair of terms that we have here are superior and inferior. The superior, as we can see here, is in the upper direction towards the cranium, hence the name cranial here. If you need a sort of way to remember this, just remember what superior means. So superior, if you think of in work, if someone is superior to you, if someone is your superior, that means that they are above you. So superior is going to be above, upper, towards the cranial cavity, that kind of stuff. Inferior, same kind of concept. If you're at work and someone is inferior, they're below you, even though that can kind of be the meaning, but in literal terms, inferior, they're going to be below you, so that's going to be lower. Also, another word is caudal, which just means towards the tail, which is kind of odd, but in this case it does mean the same thing as inferior. Next term we have here is posterior and anterior. Posterior is going to be towards the back. Easy way to remember this is when people say check your posture or watch your posture or correct your posture. They're talking about your back, whether it's straightening up from a type of hunchback curve or whatever. Posture, posterior, back. Another word for this is also dorsal. Means the same thing, back. If you think of fish, they have dorsal fins. That's going to be, kind of towards the back of them, depending on how you look. If we're talking about towards the front, we're going to be looking at anterior, which just the opposite of posterior. If you can remember, posterior is back, anterior is going to be front, and another word for anterior is ventral. It's pretty easy. Posterior, anterior, inferior, superior, relatively easy. Medial, not too shabby either to remember. When you look at the word medial, it's pretty easy to see middle, mid, any type of similarity there. Pretty easy to see, so it's pretty obvious that medial is going to mean towards the midline of the body. An example here would be that the nose is medial to the eyes. So the nose is not even just in between the eyes, but if we're looking at the midline of the body, the nose is going to be closer than the eye is. Either the eyes are to the midline, so the nose would be medial. In opposition to that is going to be lateral. If you're looking for a way to remember this, I don't know how many sports fans we have here, but in football, when you have a player running, QB, running back, wide receiver, however fancy they want to get, if they're running in this direction and they have a defender here, they can lateral it back to the side, back sort of, but mainly to the side in this case for anatomy, to a teammate, and they can catch the ball and keep going. Whatever. My point there is that lateral, to the side, to the outer part of the body, whatever. Same thing. Medial, midline, lateral, away from midline. When we're looking at proximal and distal, these are mainly going to be used for your limbs, your appendages. So if we zoom in here to your arm, So we'll take the shoulder right here as your reference point, right? So this is your point of origin. When you're talking about proximal or distal, you're going to be looking at points of origin. In the case of your arm here, your shoulder is your point of origin. So if we're comparing your elbow and your wrist, your elbow is going to be proximal to the wrist. Now, why is that? Well, your elbow is going to be closer to your shoulder than your wrist is. Your wrist is further away. So in this case, your wrist would be distal and your elbow would be proximal. How I kind of remember this is when I see proximal, I think of proximity. If you're in someone's proximity, it means you're kind of close to them somewhat. So think proximal, closer to the origin, distal, distance, farther away. Distal is going to be farther away from your point of origin than proximal. All right, not too bad there. Next, we're looking at ipsilateral. Ipsilateral, not really familiar with the word ipsi here. I don't really know another word that has ipsi in it, so I don't really have a good way for you to remember it other than the fact that if you can remember contralateral, which is the opposing word here, ipsilateral is pretty easy to remember. Ipsilateral in and of itself is referring to parts of the body that are on the same side. So as we see here in this picture, this right limb here, I know it's on our left side from our point of view, but right limb of the cadaver and the right leg, same side, so they're going to be ipsilateral to one another. Now if we go to contralateral, we see the right arm and the left leg. They're on opposite sides, they're on different sides. That goes into how I remember the word contralateral. When you look at contralateral, you can think of the word contradict. What this means, well, hopefully you know what contradict means. If you don't, it simply means difference, oppose, something like that. So when we're looking at sides, trying to determine sides, the upper limb is on the opposite side, is on a different side than this lower lower left leg here. So that explains contralateral. Hopefully I explained that good enough. If not, please let me know in the comments. I'll try to explain it better for you. And what I think is our last pair of terms. Oh no, there's one more. Okay, sorry. This pair of terms is superficial and deep. It really just kind of describes the location of something within the body. So this one's kind of more self-explanatory because deep is a very, simple word that a lot of people use, very common. But if something is deep, it's going to be more internal, more within the body. I'm not sure how else to describe that, sorry. Superficial is going to be more towards the skin. So the skin would be superficial to the heart. Your vertebra back here, right here, is more superficial than the lungs. Just kind of stuff like that. If you think about someone who is superficial in their behavior, like they're kind of fake, they're just putting up a front, like whatever you see on the outside, it's fake. That's kind of how I remember it. Deep, once again, pretty simple to remember. This term does not only apply to the whole of the body, but it can be of your feet, of your palms, so supine and prone. More commonly used, if you're looking at supine, it means that you're facing forward. So in this case, you can see this person here is laying with their chest up, toes pointed upward, they're facing upward, laying on their back. So that's going to be supine. Kind of the same way with your palm. If your palm was, facing upwards, it's a very bad hand, but you get what I'm saying. If it's facing upwards, it's going to be supine. If it's facing downwards, as with this person right here, it's going to be prone. Those are pretty common. I hear those a lot, so I'd make sure you know those. Those are the basic terms. Not too difficult to remember. Once again, it's kind of like the foundation of anatomy. So, all right. So for the quizzes that we put out, I will go over them with you guys and kind of explain to you my thought process when I am reading these questions, what goes through my mind, whatever. So the first question we have here, all these are pretty much going to say what direction is this if I remember correctly, so don't really need to repeat that, but just keep that in mind. So we see that this arrow is pointing upwards. So we just kind of talked about this. Up. What is up? Lateral. If we remember our football analogy, that is going to be to the side. So it won't. Golly. So it won't be that. Posterior, if we remember posture or the dorsal fin of a fish, that's going to be the back. So it's not going to be up. Superior. Well, what was our analogy there? We're looking at someone superior at work, someone above us, so that sounds like up. And then anterior, opposite of posterior, so that's going to be frontal, so we know it's not that. So your correct answer here is going to be superior. This one, opposite way, we're looking at going down. If we remember that superior is up, then the opposite of that is going to be inferior. So it will be this. Why is it not the other ones? Remember, posterior is back, anterior is front, and superior is up. What direction is this? This direction is frontal. This is not right. This is front. You can see based off the way that the cadaver is facing. So it's looking to the front of the cadaver. So we're not looking at lateral or medial because that has to do with the midline of the body and like right and left sort of. So you can automatically cross those out. So now we're just between posterior and anterior. Remember the analogy for posterior, posture, dorsal fin, whatever you want to use. So that's referring to back. It's not going to be that. It's going to be anterior. The next one should be, so posterior is this one. Once again, just the opposite. If we didn't have the anterior one before that, you can go through the process of elimination. I actually just had someone comment and say that caudal was posterior on the slide for this. Everything I read says posterior, I don't even know what that is. Caudal is more related to inferior. I know caudal is an embryological term. I know it means to the towards the tail, so I guess I don't know if that person was right in terms of it being posterior. You guys feel free to look that up. I've always heard that another word for posterior was dorsal and not caudal, and that caudal was for inferior. But if it's caudal too, then I apologize. It might be that, but to my knowledge, it's not caudal. Lateral, remember for the football analogy, is going to be to the side. So it's not that. And then proximal typically is going to deal with your limbs, appendages, and so it's not going to be that. Alright, so here we do have the midline drawn here, but it's not, the arrow is not pointed to or away from the midline, so it's not going to be medial. Anterior, that's not in any way the front of the body. It's honestly primarily looking here at this limb here, so we know that should be either proximal or distal. That's going to be the pair of terms that you need to look at. It's pointing down towards the hand. If I remember correctly, I think I messed up these this post here. I think I did it backwards. technically, if I was, looking at this on a test, I would think that it's pointing down towards the wrist, and the wrist is distal. So the answer should be distal. Like I said, I think I messed this up and put proximal, so please forgive me for that. But just based off this picture alone, the answer should be distal, and that is because it is pointing towards the wrist here, and the wrist is far from this shoulder, which is the point of origin. Same thing here. I think I messed it up, got it backwards. Remember, shoulder, point of origin, it's pointing upwards toward the shoulder, so it should be proximal. Here we have the midline, and we have an arrow pointed towards it. So remember, midline, what does midline sound like? Does it sound like lateral? No, it doesn't. Sound like distal? No. Does it sound like proximal? No, it sounds like medial. Doesn't get much simpler than that, guys. So that will be the answer there. Then we have lateral here. It's going to be away from the body, pointing out towards the side. Remember our football analogy. We have the quarterback here, for instance. I don't know why I like drawing this out, because it's probably the most complicated thing, but tosses it back in a lateral play to the dude, and he goes and scores for a touchdown. So the answer will be lateral, away to the side, however you want to remember it. That's going to be that. Here we have, based off this picture alone, you should be able to remember that it's either going to be superficial or deep, so you can rule out proximal and distal. These arrows are pointing outwards towards the skin. If we remember outward appearance, fake outward appearance, whatever. Well, I circled both. Just the one, superficial. So that's that. Next one, exact opposite. We're looking at deep. Once again, based off this picture, you should be able to come to the conclusion that it's going to be either superficial or deep. And then from there, you're looking at internal, within the body, internal organs. Should be pretty self-explanatory that it's deep. The answer here is definitely because who knows? No, I'm just kidding. So the answer here will be ipsilateral. Remember, I don't really have a solid way of remembering this because I've never heard of the word ipsi before this term here. But if you can remember contralateral, it's pretty easy. Same side, the right limb here, the right leg here. And then just the exact opposite, right arm and left leg. So it will be, So it will be contralateral. Remember, contralateral, contradict. If you're contradicting someone or you're contradicting yourself, you're going against something you said earlier. Going against, just you're saying the opposite, you're doing different, whatever word helps you remember. They're on different sides. One's on the right, one's on the left. I think there's one more. Let me see here. Yeah. So what position is this? Alright, so you have the body here. The back is facing upwards, but remember, the stomach is facing downwards, and that's what's important. That's what's important. What direction is the stomach facing? The toes are facing, the face is facing. They're facing down, even though she's kind of tilting her face like she's looking at us, but the stomach and toes are facing down, so that will be prone. If you have your hand, it's out like this. It's my best attempt at a hand. Looks like a handle, but whatever. Palm is facing downwards, then your hand is prone. So your answer there is prone. And exact opposite will be supine. Stomach is facing up, your toes are facing up. you're in a supine position. Once again, these terms are pretty useful to remember for further content review. Just kind of lays a foundation for those course topics and learning where things are in the body. So helpful to remember that. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. I appreciate you guys watching the video. If you can, please like and subscribe. If not, all good. Other than that, just remember, in the words of Bill Walton and John Wooden, happiness begins where selfishness ends. Later.